Quantum of Solace is a 2008 James Bond film. It is directed by Mark Forster. Now, the plot, we actually see this movie picks up right after Casino Royale. James Bond has Mr. White, and MI6 is interrogating him, trying to find out what organization does he work for and what do they plan on doing. So throughout this movie, not only does James Bond have to deal with this organization, but he also gets some closure on the death of Vesper Lynd, the woman that he was in love with. Now, what I think of Quantum of Solace is I enjoy this movie. I know this film gets kind of a bad rap on it's not a great James Bond film, or a lot of people say that it's not even a good James Bond film. I don't really understand that criticism, people saying it's not a good film, because I think there's a lot of good in it. Now, out of the Daniel Craig James Bond movies, I will admit it's the weakest, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, okay, first of all, I find it interesting that we see this Mr. White character and that he is working for this big organization that's very ominous, and especially trying to figure out who's in the organization, how they even have sort of spies and people undercover in MI6. So it's a constant, you don't know who you can trust. And I also like that James Bond throughout this movie is having to deal with Vesper Lynd's death. He can say all he wants that he is over it, that he doesn't care, that he's just about the mission. But you can tell by how aggressive he is, how intense he is, that he is emotionally involved. He is trying to get answers to what happened to her. And the answers that we get as far as what happened with her, I thought was satisfying. Yeah, I will admit that the villain in this movie, Dominic Green, he's not the greatest villain. I mean, like, he's not a real threat for Bond, really. But his plan is interesting. He's this guy who he's basically using oil to get all of the other governments off of his back. And he's stealing the water supply in Bolivia to basically stronghold them and use them for whatever he wants to do. It's sort of an ongoing, convoluted plot, but still it seems like this guy is calculated. He knows what he's doing. I sort of found it most interesting that Olga Kurylenko, she used to be an agent for the CIA, and we see that she's gone undercover to sort of infiltrate Dominic Green's organization, but she's mostly after this one general. And she's after him because years and years ago when she was young, he killed her father, he raped and murdered her mother and sister, and he left her for dead, burned down their house. So she is definitely out for revenge. And I liked not only seeing a female with a purpose, with her own mission, that just so happens to coincide with what Bond's doing, but I also like the interaction that she has with Bond, the fact that he's sort of trying to help her, guide her along in what this means to get revenge on a person, how you're gonna feel when you're in that moment of getting the revenge. And I also like how these two don't really fall for each other, because Bond is still grieving over Eva Green's character. Can you blame him? And she just seems emotionally cut off, distant, and just all about the mission, much like Bond. But speaking of Bond girls, we have Gemma Arterton, and she is so hot. Like, she comes in, she's supposed to be an agent that has to bring Bond in, because in fact, MI6 starts to lose trust in Bond, because Bond starts killing all of these people, sort of half-assed. I mean, he doesn't really care. Again, he's just going full force, and they're thinking he's out of control. And they cut off all of his resources, and he sort of is on his own. It's not like that's the first time we've seen Bond in this situation, but I like how we see just how drastic it is for him to be in the situation, because not only is M questioning his loyalty, but then the U.S. targets him as a criminal, and they're going after him. Now, the action is insane. This movie does not take a breath. It doesn't slow down with the action. And I know some people have that complaint with the newer James Bond movies, that there's too much action. I mostly see that complaint with this movie. Like, there's a ton of action, and it's almost as if maybe the action is compensating for the story. But it's fun, and it's crazy. And Daniel Craig is showing and proving once again how badass he is as James Bond. It's funny how you have some people who complained about Casino Royale, that it was boring, that it was just a poker game, and not enough went on, and that it was too long. This movie, it's almost like they try to fix that by having more action, and this is a lot shorter than Casino Royale was, and then people complain about that. It's like you can't make anyone happy. I also enjoyed seeing certain minor characters come in, like Mathis, because in Casino Royale, his loyalty, or just you didn't know if you could trust the guy. But this time you see, okay, he's actually one of the only people that Bond can trust. And then you even have Jeffrey Wright come back, because he was an undercover CIA agent at the poker game for Casino Royale. So why not? He just so happens to be undercover in the same mission that Bond is going after. How convenient, but it is good that Bond is able to at least have, again, one more person to trust. So, Quantum of Solace, again, I'm not saying it's better than Casino Royale, because it's not. It's certainly probably not one of my favorite James Bond films, but I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's one of the worst James Bond movies. I could see why some people were disappointed, but I find enjoyment out of Quantum of Solace. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of Quantum of Solace? Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Later!